Hey everyone, it's Daphne from Scrap and Create, and we are together today to work on this scrapbook mini album featuring Stamperia's House of Roses. And this mini album, just a quick reference, is 8.5 by 10.5, and the pocket pages are 8 by 10. And so this is page 4 and page 5. This is one of the feature images from the 12 by 12 collection pack, and we also are going to feature this on the cover of the album, but we're going to use the scaled down version from the 8 by 8 because it won't fit across an 8.5 inch cover. So I am using both 12 by 12s and 8 by 8s in this album. Okay, with that, let's go ahead and get started. So this is very simple. We've got 4 flaps, 2 flaps per page, and they're gonna be attached to the top and bottom. And when they close and both the pages are open, you get this beautiful dramatic image, which I really like. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and set the designer paper aside since you guys now know what it's gonna look like. And we will get started attaching our flaps. And then this is just a 12 by 12 sheet that I cut in half, split across the 2 papers, and then added a border strip. So that is what that's gonna look like. So I'll move this and we'll get our, oh, you know what? I think I got in here without tape. Shoot. It's always something. So we've got a top and bottom flap for each page. And these flaps, so you need a total of 4 for these 2 pages. And these flaps are 5.5 by 6 1/8. 5.5 by 6 1/8. And you're gonna score a 1/2 inch on the 5.5 inch side. And I'm gonna run out and go get some tape. Okay guys, I ran and got my 3/8 inch ScorTape, and I'm getting the hinges, getting tape on the hinges. And again, these are 5.5 by 6 1/8, 5.5 by 6 1/8. And that's kind of an odd size, and the reason it is because I had taken that image and it was 12 inches across and I split it, and so adding 1/8 inch allows me to get a nice border around it. So that's why it's a little bit strange. I didn't want to trim anything off that big, the outside edges of that, the clock face. Okay. You guys, I don't know what my problem is. I realized I don't have any glue in here either. I just started laughing at myself. Okay, so these flaps are going to be placed so that when we open 4 and 5, that they're as close together as possible. So page 4, they're going to get installed over on the right-hand side, and on page 5, they'll be on the left-hand side. Or just think of it as these are going to be installed as close to the spine hinge area as you can get. So hopefully that makes sense. We'll go ahead and get these in, and then I'm going to have to take a break again and go get my glue because it'll be time to add decorative paper. Okay, this is just going to be flush to the bottom. And these are 5.5 inches, and is that right? Ooh, stop. I panicked. I want to double check and make sure that these are the right. Yeah, that's right. Okay, they're 5.5, score at 1/2 inch. And so you wind up with a finished 5 by 6 1/8 panel, and 5 plus 5 makes 10. So they're actually going to join together here. That was a quick panic. Sorry about that, guys. I was thinking they weren't going to meet in the middle, but they will. And then we'll get that nice continued image, continuous image. Okay, so there's my bottom flap. I'm going to put my top one in, and I'm going to move it towards me so I can see it. So there we go. Now it's time for me to go run get my glue, and we'll start laying some designer paper down. Okay, well, I started making this page and then I blew it right off the bat, and that's what happens when I take a break. I swear I can't think straight. I had laid down my flaps and put in my first designer sheet before I put my magnets in. And because of the nature of this design itself in this large spread, I felt like trying to mask 2 magnets in the middle of a page was just going to be too tough. So I started over. I got 2 new pocket pages, and I've reinstalled the flaps. So you guys saw me do that once before. But because of the mistake I made, I won't be using the same paper here. I've gone in and I've selected this paper, which is also 12 by 12, and it's split in half. And then I'm still going to use these 2 rails on the edges. But before I do any of that, we're going to stop here and get magnets put in. So we are going to need a set of magnets for each flap. So it's a lot of magnets, but the way this lays out, you really can't put an overlap on top of the clock, or it really takes away from the design itself. So that's where that's coming from. And apparently I didn't get in here with my fat tape. It's just gonna be a comedy of errors today, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, so I do think I'm gonna do a little bit of color blocking on the inside, but my plan is to just run a strip on one side. So right here in the middle should be fine. And I'm not using my normal fat tape because I'm too lazy to get up and go get it. Which the next time I get up, I'll do that. I'm sure I've forgotten something else that I'll need to go get in a minute. But even this 3/8 helps soften the edge. Okay, so again, you're gonna need one for the top and one for the bottom flaps. Now, in other cases, when I've got flaps that are joining like that, a lot of times what I'll do is I'll add a third element that overlaps both, and then I can get away with using just one magnet. So if you don't use the clock design like what I'm doing, you could very easily design a topper, and then it would go across both flaps, and you would minimize the number of magnets you need. And I'll show you what I mean as soon as I get this magnet in. I'll close them and describe what I mean by topper. I think most of you know what I'm talking about, but I'll demonstrate. Okay, so one of these is done. So when I say a topper, since these don't overlap each other, you can't use one magnet. But a way to get around that would be to use one of the ephemera cards, adhere it to one of the flaps, like so, and then you would place your magnet behind just this flap, this topper, and that way you'd only use one set of magnets instead of 2. But like I said, because of the way I'm using the specific design paper here, I don't want to cover it up. So it is going to look like that. Okay, so this side's done for magnets. Now we're going to do the same thing over here. And I'm off screen, I know, but I was just tearing little pieces of tape to cover the magnets. Okay. Somebody once asked if I ever used anything but blacks, and not very often, but occasionally. And I looked at using black for this one, and you could use black, but I just don't like the, I didn't like the pink and black combination. So I pulled in this Ivory cardstock, and this is, and I tell you guys this all the time, but I'll tell you again, this is Astro Brights, or Nina. And I'll show you the pack. I'm gonna go get it for you so you can see what it is. Sorry about that, easier said than done. This is the paper that I'm using, and you do have to be a little bit more delicate with this than you do with the black for a couple reasons. One, it's very easy to get dirty. And then the other reason is, even though it says 65 pounds and so does the black, this doesn't feel quite as thick. So I'm a little bit more careful when I'm scoring. I try not to be overly aggressive when I'm scoring my lines. But again, I get this at Walmart. It comes in 50 pack sheets and it's just under $4. I think it's $3.97. And the other reason I really like it is it matches Graphic 45 tags perfectly. And that's a hard thing to do. So that's one of the other reasons why I really like to use it. So if you like Graphic 45 tags and you like the cream tags, this matches. So, okay, so enough about that. Let's go ahead and, okay, so now we've got our magnets in, so we can actually start laying in our papers. As soon as I figure out the order, I think this is the way they go. Yes, okay. So let's get started. I'm going to pull in a piece of black cardstock. And sorry for the setback on the center pages, but I just really didn't want to work around on the magnet, so this is what we're doing. Just about out of glue. Okay. And this is going to be a little bit patched together, so I'm going to repeat the flap measurements. They're 5.5 by 6 1/8, 5.5 by 6 1/8, and you're going to score a 1/2 inch on the 5.5 inch side. So I know I'm going to have to edit this because I had made that mistake. I'm not sure if I'm going to cut that part out. So I just want to make sure I'm repeating myself, and I get you covered either way. Okay, there we go. Well, hello, Nala. Hi, sweetie. She came in to lay with me. That's a good girl. She doesn't like being alone, even in a different room. She's a big girl. Okay, so isn't that impressive? So like I said, when you open up page 4 and 5, there'll of course be a black strip here from the hinge. This is what it's going to look like, and I think it looks pretty darn good. Okay, so the next couple of pieces are these little trim pieces that are going to go on the edges. And I'm going to install those, and then I'm going to come back and trim these two center pieces to fit exactly right. So we'll set those aside. This is the trim piece for page 4, so let's do that one first. And this is from the 12 by 12. Of course, anything that's 10 inches tall has to come from the 12 by 12, right? Okay, that's page 4. And I'm not sure if you can see it, but I'll bring it a little closer. You can see that it kind of comes in slightly. And the reason is I trimmed these pieces from a sheet, and it just happened to be the design side, the strip. Here it is. It's this one and the, no, it's not, is it? No, because it's got the ivory, but it's kind of the same thing where it was 2 strips. So these strips are not anything I measured for design purposes. That's just the size they were in the pack, and I can tell you what they are. They are 2 inches, okay? 2 inches. And they'll go slightly underneath the 2 flaps at 2 inches. And then because it's 8 inches, we know we need that centerpiece to be just under 6 inches wide, which we'll trim it out after we get these in. Sorry, yeah, I was trying to make sure that my ivory is going in the right direction when I lay it down. Okay, so just double checking. That's up. This is down. And I've got my strip in the right orientation. Okay, lovely. Now, okay, the next thing I want to do is so as part of this process, when I trimmed down the clock, because it's 12 inches tall, I kept it 12 inches wide, I took the edges off, and that's what these are. So I'm going to use these edges inside here, and I'm going to, I think, add a strip to the top and bottom like so, just so it's a coordinating strip. And maybe I'll do that. And I've got these papers trimmed out to go with it. I'm kind of like, I'm trying to decide which sides. So the sheet that's going to go in here is this one. So that's a lot of flowers. So I think I'll go with the more muted side since this is so strong of a pattern, and use this side. And then use these little pink strips to add just a little bit more interest to the flaps when they come down. Okay, that looks good. So the next thing I need to do is run and get my ink, because I'm going to trim these down to fit, and I know I need to ink my edges, and I'll be right back. Okay, so I'm going to close at page 5 for the moment, and we're going to focus on page 4 and get these papers. I'm going to go ahead and knock out the largest piece and get it trimmed out and inked. Now, because this is a part of a 12 by 12 sheet and it's split right here, I don't want to trim off the center. I want to trim off the outside edge so that when you open it up side by side, you still see that continuous pattern. So anything I trim off is going to come off for page 4 is going to come off the left-hand side, and for page 5, it'll come off the opposite side, the right-hand side. So, yes. So I think I've got the right height. I just need to make this a little bit narrower. Okay, I think that's it. looks good. So let's get some ink on it. This paper is very, very pretty. It's very feminine. It's very pretty. Greek gardens. You could, I think you could even use this as a wedding or an anniversary book. Be a really good anniversary book because it's not too monochromatic, you know, not just all white. Yeah. While I went to get my ink, I went ahead and got my fat tape, so if we put more magnets down, they'll be covered better. All right. Well, I guess it's time to chit chat while I put glue down. Hope everybody's doing well. I know this is, it's hard to tell what the age of all the viewers are, but I know that it typically tends to be a little bit more mature. So I don't know how many of you guys have kids in school right now, but I do. I have a teenager. He's 17, and this has been a real challenge. First of all, let me tell you, Common Core math might as well be Greek to me. So I feel it's very difficult for me to help him in the subject that he has the most trouble with. And then just the teachers don't quite have it all together in terms of where things are. So every teacher has a different program, so it's very confusing, even for me. So this quarantine and the end of this school year has been a real challenge when we still have another 5 weeks to go. It's like pulling teeth. I mean, at least when they're at school, they're captive. Here, God, it seems like they get distracted so easily. Well, and then of course they don't have a teacher here. They have their parents, which is not the same. Not the same at all. Especially at this grade. I mean, I think it might be different if he was in grade school. Still no picnic, but I just don't know the subjects. So it's a real challenge. Anyway, so that's kind of what we're going through here. And then it's weird, like I said, the teachers are kind of all over the place. So he has math due today at 11 p.m. on a Saturday. So, you know, the whole idea of the sort of Monday, and it got posted yesterday, you know, getting your assignments through the week and then working on them. We have to keep checking to see if things are popping into his inbox that weren't there the day before. So I feel really uncomfortable. I feel like we're missing something all the time. Hopefully I'm just overreacting, but I feel for the teachers as well. I'm sure this is a difficult time for them as well, in more ways than one. So, but I'm ready. Along with that reason and several others, I'm ready for this to be over. Okay. Okay, let's see how we did. Oh, that looks good. So, yay! We did it. Some ink. And then we'll flip it up. And then, of course, everything we're doing here, we're going to do on page 5. Quiet in my house today. My son's gone, my husband's gone. Just checking, make sure they're the same height. It almost looks square, but it's not quite. Oh, I should tell you what that strip is. So that strip is, like I said, it just came off the clock sheet. And I just trimmed it at the strip. And if you're not using the same pattern, The width of this is 1 1/8. It doesn't have to be 1 1/8. That just happens to be how wide it was. But just so you know, that's what I chose. Did I get it right? No, I think I had it sideways. Yeah. It's almost square, but not quite, so it was very easy one to try to put in upside down. Okay. Okay, now we're going to do the top, same thing. We'll trim our strip down. Again, this is 1 1/8 inch wide, and we will trim it down to the right length. Okay, and then my logic here, and most of you know this, if you're new, I just want to share these tips with you, is when you're going to do color blocking. First of all, I don't usually use anything smaller than 1 inch wide, just because it's so hard to handle in the trimmer. It happens occasionally, but it's not that often. When you're going to do that, always lay down, of the pieces, lay your smallest piece down first, and then measure everything off that. It's much easier to handle this and square this off in the trimmer than it is to try to mess around with this little 1 by 5 inch strip. So that's just a tip, and it served me well. So like, for example, if you lay this in and you were still trying to get that gap that I have here, it's much harder to trim that down 1/8 of an inch or 1/16 of an inch than it is this. So that is where that comes from. That's not a pencil. So somebody asked me about inking the edges. Why do I ink the edges? And I ink the edges especially on the graphic collections because they're so dark. Because the core of the paper, all the ink is on top. The core of the paper is actually white. And when I'm laying down that paper on black, I don't like to see traces, you know, when you're tipping the book sideways or whatever, traces of a white core around it. I think it's less significant when you have a much paler collection like this, but I still like to darken the edges. It just kind of helps pop the, like this little strip, you go to the trouble to do this color blocking. If you add a little ink, it really, you know, helps it pop out, stand out. Okay, I was just trying to make sure I was putting it in the right way. Like I said, it's not quite square. One side's like a 32nd of an inch shorter. It's really hard to put glue on this side, but I think adding roses to these panels would have just been too much pattern. Too much pattern. So much happier with this, I think, yeah. Oop, a little too much glue. So one of the things for sure when you're working with cream, I'm going to make a racket here, is make sure you have wipes, because you know, you get glue on your hands, and then if there's any dirt, you pick it up and it sticks to your hands and you transfer it to your cream cardstock. So make sure you've got a wipe handy to keep your fingertips clean and to keep the smudges off your ivory cardstock. So there you have it. That is page 4. And now we are going to go onto page 5. Here's page 5. And we're going to do the same thing. It's just a repeat process. So we'll start by laying down the largest piece in the center, which needs to be trimmed out just a little. I want to make sure it's the right height. It is. So now all we need to do is figure out how much we're going to take off. Remember the outside edge, so that this pattern, we're going to take it off the outside edge because this pattern is continuous with page 4. So we're going to line it up to the edge, get the border that we're looking for, and then I'm going to put my pencil marks down. We'll see. I think that might not be quite enough, but we're going to check it. Okay. All right, so I want to make sure real quick that's up. I want to make sure I'm consistent with my pattern, and I was, but you always want to stop and make sure. I just got a text from, or a comment from somebody who's working on an album and installed some of her designer paper upside down. And I've done it, and it is so disheartening. Especially if you get all the way through a page and then you realize at the end, oh my gosh, I did all that work and all that beautiful paper and it's upside down. So when I've had that problem, what I had done, in my case, what I had done is I had designed the pages outside the book and then went to put them inside the book and somehow got the book turned upside down. I don't know how I did it. So 2 of my pages were going the opposite of the rest. And I wound up using, because I insert my pocket pages with tape, with a ScorTape, I was able to use undo to pull the pages out. It still made a mess, but I was able to pull them out and flip them over because it's a pocket page and reinstall them. It was very distressing though. And it wasn't a simple thing to do. I was really afraid I was just going to completely ruin it, but I did finally get it off and out. And then unfortunately, because I used undo on the hinge where the pocket was laying over the hinge, so I put undo on either side of that hinge, and of course it seeps down, and then it got onto the tape that was actually adhering the whole hinge to the book. So I had to try to figure out a way to get some glue in there after it dried to reinforce it, since I had weakened it by using that undo. So it's good to try to work into a regular practice of reorienting your book and verifying that you're going in the right direction. So I try to do that, especially because I'm always flipping the book around because I want the edges next to me. I don't want to lean over the book. I want the edges to come to me. So that means I'm constantly turning the pages around. And depending on how you work, you may too. And that just increases the risk of having that problem. Okay. Because just by process design, I'm constantly putting it upside down. That's the other reason why I changed from inserting all my pages and design and adding the designer paper inside the book to doing everything outside the book. Because I do all this flipping around, that really puts a lot of wear and tear on the overall cover of the book itself. This way, I'm only doing it for this page and not every page I've already done ahead of it, and you know, flipping it around over and over and over again. So page 1 gets flipped around the most, page 8 the least, and the cover gets flipped for everything. So that was one of the reasons why I changed to this practice. That, and the other reason is it's a much flatter surface, so I think you get a better result. The more pages you get into your book and the more designer paper you get laid in, the more it starts to bow out, and it gets harder and harder to get flat, you know, smooth surfaces to work on. So just some thoughts there, and a little bit of background on why I do it this way. Now my base tutorials show me inserting the pocket pages, and I do that just because I want people, if they want a book and they don't want to do what I'm doing, but they want a book to start with, that's everything you need, right? You don't have to install the pocket pages until you add your flaps, but if you just did that tutorial, you walk away with a 4-page mini album with you know, 4 pocket pages, right, for inserts. So I didn't want to leave it unfinished in case somebody wanted to just have that base and not follow the rest of the tutorial. So I wanted it to be useful to everybody. But I know it's a little bit confusing at first, if you don't know why I did that. Okay, ink and glue, and it's warm here today. It was a little bit foggy this morning, but it's really warmed up. I think after this page, I'm going to take a break and get something cold to drink. And you may notice that I put glue on top of the tape here, and that's so the paper will glide over it, because otherwise it grabs and it doesn't let go, and you have to tear the paper to lift it off the tape. So just a little bit of glue is just all you need for it to be able to adjust it over the tape on the magnet. I find it makes all the difference in the world. Okay, so I'm going to pull page 4 back in real quick. So here's page 4. Closed and open, and so I've decided to just follow the pattern. So on the top of page 5, the pink strip will be on this side, just FYI. Okay, and we're almost done with page 5. Okay. Okay, I think that's it. This is our last piece on page 5. And I'll lay them back side by side so we can look at that real quick. Okay. All right. Okay. Do a little housekeeping. Including my hands so that I'm not smearing all my cream cardstock. And there we go. That is page 4 and 5, and it's going to look like so. So you've got these flaps that both go up and down, and then you've got this beautiful continuous pattern. So this is just gorgeous. I love it. Lots of photo space. These are 5 by 6, just slightly over 6, 5 by 6 and 1/8. So that's a nice large photo spot. Very easy to put, you know, a 4 by 5 photo here, and even have a little bit of room for journaling. And you could even do that journaling right here on the spot, you know, like add a date or a title, for example. So that is page 4 and 5. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Sorry about the nonsense in the beginning with magnets. It just takes me a little while to get my mojo back. So next time we get together, we'll be working on page 6. See you guys soon.